You're welcome along to World and Union Balls.ie's weekly rugby show with me, Mick McCarthy, alongside Maurice Brosnan. How are you, Maurice?
Great, Mick. Yeah, how about you?
Well, I'm not bad because just a couple of days ago we watched Ireland get back to the Ireland that we know, and that was 90% possession, 95% territory, crawling along, pick and run, going through the phases, and eventually just wearing a team out so much that all they wanted to do was get sin binned and get a rest for 10 minutes. Just the Ireland of old, you know, the real exciting rugby that brought us a Grand Slam and the win over the All Blacks and the greatest year of Irish professional rugby's history.
And even just the one word I think you associate with this Ireland team when they play well is accuracy, and it was finally back in terms of just the passes that weren't sticking were finally sticking. Even just really simple stuff like Rob Kearney had referenced this in Gatland House last week. When that play finally sticks, what it does for a team, and you saw that like with Keith Earls' play, for example, or stuff like that. Like it clicked, and it's been something we've kind of been crying out for a long time, and it's well overdue.
No, without a doubt, and like I say it facetiously about the kind of the boring style, but I genuinely was delighted to see it back. I tweeted after about 20 minutes of the game, I was like, this is more like it. This is what this team is built on, and look, maybe we do want them to evolve at some stage, but at the moment, what they need to do is get back on the horse. And, you know, we'll talk about Wales in a second, but what I think is going to be really helpful is get that win under the belt, play well, get a handy win, but 6-day turnaround means not too much more time to think about this. You're straight back on. It's probably the best 6-day turnaround they'll ever have, because this is the time they need to, you know, be playing games and just getting this going.
And even just in terms of physically, what it meant to after 50 minutes, Cian Healy, because there's no secret the fact that he's probably playing the most attrition position. He was the first sub, and very quickly after you get off both your halfbacks,
both halfbacks gone.
That kind of like it's once the game was wrapped up after that, it kind of became an on-contest, but it was just about trying to get the 6-day turnaround, especially with Wales having the extra day. You want to try and make up for that advantage by giving them a longer break.
An extra day and at home, you know, both of those things together. Just on today's show, I should probably tell you that we are going to focus on Wales. Josh Gardner of the Mud and Blood podcast, one half of that podcast, big Wales fan. We had him on the show a few weeks ago, and we're going to get him on to talk again. We're going to talk in detail about Wales's form, how they've done it under the shadow of everything that's going on in Welsh rugby at the moment, like just absolute shocking stuff, and how those players have come together with a real siege mentality under Warren Gatland, who deserves enormous credit. That they're going for a Grand Slam in Cardiff. They could win the Grand Slam without a bonus point, which would be remarkable in itself. And we'll talk to Josh about everything to do with Wales and that match. Maurice, we'll also get your team. You were a little bit off last week, but from what Joe eventually picked, but not too bad.
No,
not too bad.
Kind of slowly came back around after.
Yeah, and actually, I think a couple of his decisions worked out well. I thought Iain Henderson, who we all wanted a bit of tight burn action, but Iain Henderson played well. Delan played well when he came on.
Really well, yeah.
There's definitely just a depth, the second row there. The thing I wanted to talk about most, though, and again, I tweeted this. I should stop tweeting during these games. I'm just giving away all my podcast takes before I do, but the one thing that I really took away from, and there's a kind of, it's almost just a sense of like, you forget sometimes how far Irish rugby has come. But I grew up watching Ireland and France. I heard Keith Wood talking about it recently, that you think he only beat them twice in his career and played them so many times. I grew up on hammerings. And in those hammerings, generally, we went about 30 points down in the first hour. And then Ireland would sneak in 2 tries when France had basically started smoking fags, walking up, you know, as they had just basically given up and were just waiting for the post-match dinner. And Ireland had so many garbage time tries against France, and as we were winning 26-0, and I was hoping we'd nil them, I actually got satisfaction out of them making it a 12-point game in a game that should have been a 30 or 40 points.
Yeah, did you? Yeah,
don't get me wrong. I know what you're going to say. I definitely was like, oh God, could we not have just finished it out?
Yeah.
Like there's as the fan of this team, I was disappointed, but I'm just saying that there's a part of me, of the overall Irish rugby fan, that has taken no satisfaction from the what's the word, the consolation score. I couldn't think of that word. That's taken no satisfaction from it in the past, and it's just made a scoreline look closer than it is for the history books. I was almost thinking like, God, it's great that France are coming to Dublin and getting consolation tries. It's remarkable. Like,
Yeah, like for me,
France were shit, but anyway.
On that team, actually, there's an element of sadness to kind of what French rugby has become for me. Like there's a especially like there's a lot of ability in that team, but it's just how I thought they were really poor. But I think for Ireland, it was more so about the performance, not even necessarily a result, just about a performance as a team, like focus on your own performance. And it was a theme throughout that game that this was a kind of a team performance. Like the pack, particularly, kind of to a man, really turned up.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, there's a minor caveat in the fact that how bad France were, and there's like really kind of elementary stuff that would just do your head in. Like there's a stage when I don't know if you remember this in the first half where Bastro turned over Ringrose, Ireland got the ball back, and then there was a pass out wide from Conor Murray to Jordan Larmour, and he just dived on the ground to try and catch it. It just was a poor pass, went to ground, it was a knock on.
Yeah.
But that was
Ringrose, I think, yeah.
Sorry, it was Ringrose, yeah. But off that chance, I think that was the best try chance Ireland had, because if you look at the French defence at that time, there's 3 players in the French defensive line against 5, and all 3 are running in different directions. So you've got Gael Ficao who's running laterally, Bastro who's running across. Sorry, it's not Bastro. It's Picamo who's running across his other inside defender. Like there's just no uniformity in it. It was an unbelievable chance if you just had numbers out wide. It didn't work out. Yeah. But that stuff is widespread in this French team. It's just there was a Jamie Hay and this goes back to the idea, the trickle down cultures. We've spoken about this with Ian Costello on this podcast in the past about the idea of trying to influence a culture. It has to be something that you're obsessed with. And Jamie Hagan, who's playing in the D2 at the minute, did an interview in the Sunday Independent on Sunday, and he spoke about like at his club where you get stages where the owners just drive in and sack all the coaches and tell the players they're going to take it for a week, and this kind of like total calamitous stuff. You've heard similar stories about the French rugby team where there's reports that Laporte has now arrived in and training the team. Like it's kind of a circus act. I think it's a massive waste of potential given the fact of what they could be if there was as a uniformity. None of that should or will affect Ireland. It's just something to kind of...
No, I didn't know. And when I say I get satisfaction from it, it's more how the tables have turned for us. We're now the team that are kind of like sending people home kind of happy to have got a late try. It's actually no satisfaction from how far France have fallen. And on the calamitous culture, like Brunel, Livremont, Saint-André, who was a well thought of coach when he was in England. I'm missing the most recent coach before Brunel.
Guy Novez.
Guy Novez, one of the greatest coaches of all time, and probably had lost a step or two, and that Toulouse team were definitely on the decline when he took over. But one of the renowned coaches of world rugby. They all can't be these lunatic figures that completely just make a balls of it every time they go into France. There has to be something more structurally unsound, and that's I know that's what you're saying, but if you actually take the people involved, like it doesn't make sense that, like, I mean, how many French coaches have you heard being called a clown on Six Nation coverages, and that they're ruining French rugby and stuff like that? It can't just always be the coach.
And they're in like it's an impossible situation to be working in a situation where you're so at loggerheads with your clubs. Like you've got a situation where unions and clubs are literally in competition against each other. So in terms of that comes down to in terms of access to players, in terms of really simple stuff like revenue streams, all that kind of stuff. Like it just goes to show how much more successful the Irish model is. But at the same time, like they're kind of fighting a losing battle constantly, and I would be not one bit surprised to see a change though. Like we've seen GIF players introduced already. Paddy Butler spoke to us about that. On top of that the idea that the World Cup is going to be based there in 2023, they have to get their house in order for that. It's funny the amount of times that World Cup has been referenced, despite the fact that it's the World Cup this year.
And with a team talented enough to do something at it, if not win it.
That is the 2023 World Cup that is often referenced in relation to France.
Yeah, they could turn it around quickly though, and that is the thing. You say there's talent there. There just needs to be some kind of, like, a Genesis report maybe.
Or even just that, I think
they work, don't they?
even just if it takes something really simple like this is maybe a siege mentality, like the idea where you get I was kind of curious to note that a lot of the players who were very vocally critical were kind of bombed out initially, like Morgan Parra, who spoke about not knowing what positions they're playing in or things like that, and suddenly he was out in their string against a performance against Scotland. But then on the flip side of that, I thought they might be better against Ireland. I thought they were really poor. Yeah,
I thought DuPont and Intermac would make it. It almost, it's not anything to do with them. It wasn't the match, or it's not a team strong enough to support inexperienced halfbacks really at the moment, you know. Anyway, look, enough about France, because I think it's something we could talk about for a long time, and we will as we head towards the World Cup. But on Ireland, you know, a better performance, like as you said, a lot of accuracy, and they did a lot of things well, and they got some of their plays off, you know, which just haven't been working. They haven't had they haven't just been able to get through to that next phase at all in the tournament. And today they did, or on Sunday they did for the first time. You've been looking at a couple of them. Yeah,
I mean, I saw like when you talk about set pieces with this Ireland team, their scrum has been solid for about 3 years. Ever since Greg Feek arrived, essentially, the work he's done is kind of phenomenal. I actually think this might be an anomaly. I need to check this, but I think this was the first time Ireland lost a scrum against on their own feed in 2 years, I think.
Wow, really?
I think it was 48 scrums. Yeah, so this, and it wasn't a bad push. It was a miscue. So, but I mean, the one aspect of something that I think a lot of people might have been concerned, might be the wrong word, but might have been kind of looking at, was the line out, because it was poor against Italy. I mean, there's no way getting about it, but that was 75%. This weekend it was back to 94%. And I remember doing a coaching session with Brett Wilkinson, the old Connacht prop, and he used to talk about the idea that, you know, like, your line out can never be simple enough to be predictable, but it should be smart enough and yet simple. So what he's talking about is, like, keep it super simple, but you're trying to outsmart your opponent, and that's what you're trying to do every single time. And I think,
and that can include things like timing as much as mixing up the actual throws and the directions. Like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, that's like a really fun. This is a really simple thing with a lineup. But say, for example, Rory Best is thrown to, you know, the first, I think, 4 throws were to Iain Henderson or Peter O'Mahony. Then he overthrew one, and it was because it was to James Ryan. And I think that was just because in his process, he was thrown to a certain height. Like, you've got a guy like Iain Henderson who's a monster, and Peter O'Mahony, who in terms of his height and that he reaches in a jump, I don't think there's anybody who can really rival him. And then this isn't a criticism of James Ryan, but he just doesn't get the same, you know, like, vertical jump, whatever, and on that. So if that was a throw to Iain Henderson or Peter O'Mahony, it isn't an overthrow. The cue is perfect. But within, like, there's certain things within the framework of Ireland's line-up play that I really like. So we spoke recently about the Crusaders, the try they scored against the Reds, where they just didn't put up a jumper. They just put a guy in it too. So it's, you know, your front jumper, and he catches the ball on the ground and they maul that over. So it's just, it's, you know, no wasted energy. And then if you look at, you know, to go back to the Irish example, there's been subtle manipulations within it that I think are really kind of clever. So there was the Scotland game where Conor Murray stood in at the front of the line-out and Josh van der Flyer stood as a scrum half. I mean, it's a total legal thing to do. But by doing that, he occupied the front lifter. So Dell, at the time, was looking at Conor Murray. And because he was looking at Conor Murray, he missed his lift. So you get an uncontested jump against them. They take the ball. It's just so simple within that. And then you look at what Wales did, the very same thing. I wonder, did they look at this as well? Because they put George North at the front against Scotland again last weekend. Except this time they did throw it to George North. I think because Adam Dell or whoever else might have been disciplined, don't get caught by the guy at the front. Focus on your job. And this time George North goes in. George North catches and breaks through. Now, it didn't turn out quite as well because he got tackled by the Scottish hooker. But Ireland then bring Keith Earls in to the front. So this is, like, all this is, but it's kind of really simple, but it's slight evolutions on that. So they tried it in the 13th minute with Keith Earls at the front and looping around, and it didn't work out. But eventually, when he does stand in the front and they take down the ball to maul it, he, like, you know, we talk about this thing, animation. So Joe Schmidt wants his players to be really, really animated. He is the opposite of animation at that moment. He's standing there, his hands are by his side, he's doing everything he can, like, he's loitering, he's doing everything he can not to become, you know, attract any attention. And then suddenly Cedar Sander breaks from the back of the maul, and Cedar Sander, one of the striking things on that is he doesn't run, you know, a vertical run. He runs laterally. So it's at times, like, you'd be critical of him if he was breaking off a run because he's running towards the pillar, but he's doing it deliberately because he's freeing a gap for Keith Earls to come back in. And that's really, really simple in itself. But when it works, it's perfect. It just works. It's a totally in sync move. It's this thing going back to Joe Schmidt's strike plays. Like, none of them are. I wouldn't be one bit surprised if people are watching Super Rugby and taking these plays from there and trying to implement them in the Six Nations. He's spoken before about the idea that he takes them from the Mitre 10 Cup. So none of these plays are, you know, the most grandest or complex things in the world. But the point isn't that they're, you know, massively intricate moves. The point is that they're successful.
That they work,
and they consistently are. It's like, I think this Irish team, in terms of rugby IQ or in terms of their intelligence, is at a level that we will never have seen previously. to the extent where, like, something really simple like Cian Healy, we spoke about this off air, Cian Healy recognising that if the ball is on the try line, he can't be offside, he can push the ball down. Like, that is something that Conor Murray tried to do with Munster against Gloucester this season, in terms of recognising that he's got an opportunity there. They actually, if you watch that back again, he looks, the 2 rucks before that, he looks both times to see where that ball is. Like, he was hunting that.
Actually, because I have to be honest and say I didn't know that Healy.
But a lot of people
didn't know the rule, and people told me on Twitter, and that's fine, because I was like, how is he not offside? Because I just kept checking was the ball out, but it was really within the ruck. There was 3-4 legs there between it. And I was like, I didn't know the rule. I'd never heard it before, and of course it makes perfect sense. And yeah, he did. He waited until it went back. But if you'll notice, I'm just trying to illustrate your point here about Ireland being this smart and alert. Like, everyone can be smart and everyone can know the rules, but it's, do you see them in the moment? Rugby team, right? Because Healy saw it and went for it. But if you look at the replay, the one from behind the goal, another player is jumping in as well.
Conor Murray on the other side.
It was Murray, and he's seen it too, and he went, right, I'm going for this too, and it was like, there's at least 2 players aware of what's going on there. Obviously, Healy had the better angle to come in, and that's a try. If he had touched that down instead of knocked it on, that's a try we would have been talking about for years.
And like, there was a moment where I think this Irish team, their discipline is incredible. I think they only gave away 1 penalty in the first half, and then the game slightly descended, and I think in the end they might have given away 7 in total. But there was a moment where Cian Healy, separate to this, Cian Healy tackled the scrum half. He thought the ball was out, and the referee actually called the ball out. And if Johnny Sexton was really, really out vocal, and he shouted at him, "You're not allowed to play the 9." And I think that was their idea, was that they were looking to block the kicker and convert that into a scoring opportunity. And also it's the idea that Irish discipline is self-enforced. Like, him vocally criticising his opinion. We spoke about body language a lot on this thing. That was enforcing like a team ethic. Like, this is a team rule. We don't concede that kind of penalty. That was what he was trying to do. It was the manifestation of that idea right at that moment. And that just comes back to like your rugby IQ, like understanding that is actually a thing. You could see French players were nearly baffled by what Cian Healy was trying to do. Like, it didn't really register with them. And I think this Irish team, in terms of their in-game intelligence, like another person who
if France were thinking on the same level as Ireland there, they wouldn't have let that ball touch the try line.
Another player who embodies that is somebody like Gary Ringrose. Like, Gary Ringrose's in-game intelligence is phenomenal. I don't think there's a better player currently playing in the centre who's as good on both sides of the ball. Like, there's better attackers and there's better defenders, but nobody who's as like versatile as he is in terms of what he does on both sides. Like, his defensive ability, he's somebody. I never was aware of this until we spoke to the Wasps defence coach Ian Costello. But the benefit, like, he spoke to us about stop obsessing about Owen Farrell's missed tackles. And then if you look at it, a lot of time Gary Ringrose comes up, shoots up at a line and misses a tackle. But what he does in the case of Gael Ficao is forces him back infield, and he does it because they have numbers on the other side. So by forcing him back infield, somebody else makes a tackle and they get set and numbers drift across then. But he's doing it deliberately. Like, making the tackle isn't the point. Not letting the ball get wider is the point. There's a deep, like, there's nuances that we can't even comprehend going on here, and Ireland seem to have them down right now.
Yeah, and it was like, I mean, it's no surprise that Ireland's performance just became that little bit more consistent and accurate with Ringrose back in the team. And I mean, he was easily Ireland's best player against England in a poor performance. And CJ Stander as well, just coming back in, just links that pack together, doesn't he? Because just having that option of him, and it's not even always barreling down lads, but he just takes so many guys out of the game, and having him back at full strength, let's face it, he was literally a broken man for nearly the entire England game before he went off. So those 2 players had a lot to a rugby team when they come back in, and especially I think when it's like one's in the centre and one's at 8, that's it's 2 such important positions in terms of having the ball, Anyway, look, we can get more into it, and I think you're going to do up some of that analysis on site, and people can read it, because I definitely learned something there. I didn't. I I have to say I was following along going, I didn't really see this yesterday. Now I have to be honest, but we'll get your team who you think should start against Wales in a few minutes, but I do want to talk more about Wales, and I'm delighted to say that rejoining the show right now is Josh Gardner, one half of the Mud and Blood podcast. Josh, thanks so much for talking to us.
No worries, gents. Thanks for having me. I can't imagine why you asked me back.
No, well, we had a lot of good response last time. We talked about rugby jerseys and lots of other things, but this time it's more kind of brass tacks. You know, we're at the end of the Six Nations campaign. You're a Welshman, we're Irish, and you know Ireland are going to Cardiff to try and do what we did to England 2 years ago and crush the hopes of a nation and take a Grand Slam away. You know, we might not be Six Nations champions anymore, but we want to be the last Grand Slam team. But it is interesting. I mean, when we talked at the start of the Six Nations, I know Maurice here was saying that Wales are the dark horses to go on and possibly win the tournament. But you know, a Grand Slam in a year like this, and they haven't done it yet. But like, it'd be an amazing way for Gatland to finish up as Wales coach in the Six Nations, and obviously what a fill up to bring him into the World Cup.
Massively so. I mean, it is interesting. Like I at the start of the tournament, I sort of felt like there was a slight chance that we might have quite a good tournament. But as you say, I never expected a Grand Slam. I didn't think anyone would get a Grand Slam this year because it just felt too tight and too competitive. And obviously, that might not. Yeah, there's a very good chance that might still not happen. But it's an absolute testament to sort of the force of will of Warren Gatland and Sean Edwards, that after everything that's gone on in this tournament, the shambles that's gone on off field, the you know, we've not played brilliantly for quite long stretches of this tournament, but we've still kind of managed to find a way to win. And that would kind of almost be a perfect Warren Gatland sign off, really, is that you haven't played brilliantly, you haven't done as well as you could do, but somehow you just managed to pull it out when it matters.
Which is kind of one of the most remarkable things. I mean, they brought in a rule when they instigated bonus points in the Six Nations to give a super bonus point to the winners of the Grand Slam. We really didn't think it would, you know, definitely not as quickly come into fruition. But if Wales get a 4-point win against Ireland and England, as we expect, get 5 points against Scotland, they're going, you know, without that Grand Slam bonus, you know, England probably would have won on points difference. So. Glad they brought it in, first of all, but it is amazing that a team is going into a home game to win a Grand Slam, having not even scored a bonus point yet.
Yeah, we've scored 9 tries in this tournament. That's the same as Italy.
Yeah,
you know, it's like, I mean, no disrespect to Italy, but that does show kind of every game has been. It's been, you know, as a Welsh fan, it's been horrible watching this Six Nations because not a single game has been enjoyable on it. I've never enjoyed a Wales game in my life because that's just who I am. But even like people who normally enjoy Wales games have just been saying like, these are horrible to watch because none of them are easy. None of them are straightforward. They've all just been kind of really horrible, sort of attritional, squeak the win out in the end sort of thing. And yeah, it's not been fun, but it's been effective.
Does that efficiency give you confidence or cause for concern with Ireland coming this weekend?
It's a little bit of both. Like I'm reassured that we haven't managed to cock it up yet, but at the same time, I'm slightly concerned at how much we've struggled for fluidity for large portions of all of the games that we've played so far. And against a team like Ireland, that's always worrying because, you know, you guys know how to keep the ball, you guys know how to exert pressure, and it's a different kind of challenge for us this weekend, definitely.
Yeah, but without it becoming a cliche, you know, winning is a habit, and like knowing how to win close games is something that, you know, it's something we talked about a lot with Ireland last year in 2018, and the run that Wales are on now, phenomenal run. Like I think it's like 4 games off the world record at this stage, the famous All Blacks 18 tests, and you know. Like for a country like Wales to go so many test wins in a row, and like it's been relatively unheralded. I feel like I don't think that, you know, Gatland and his team are getting enough credit. I feel like they got a lot of credit for beating England in the manner that they did, and rightly so. But it's, you know, because they haven't set the world on fire in all the rest of the games, this winning streak has actually gone under the radar for what it is. Yeah,
it's sort of the most workmanlike record winning streak that, you know, I can remember. We're not blowing teams away, with the exception of maybe sort of Argentina in the summer. We haven't been smashing anybody. We haven't been scoring loads of really, really good tries, although we have scored decent tries when we've scored them. But yeah, it feels like there's not been a lot of, and understandably, because we didn't really beat anybody that good until England. When you look at that streak, and it's like we're beating Argentina, we're beating the ghost of South Africa, we're beating a very limited Australia side. We're beat it's with a win's a win, but until the England game, there wasn't really a proper statement win, I don't think.
Fair enough.
To what extent, Josh, would you think that this achievement is more remarkable because of all the distractions that have hung over this Wales team? Like, I mean, whatever about what's going on in the club game, you've got Warren Gatland who's definitely leaving. There's been a lot of speculation about maybe Sean Edwards and Wasps. Like, this kind of stuff in Ireland, it's been perceived as maybe a distraction for players that, it's Joe Schmidt's farewell. And yet, in Wales, they seem to be chugging along just fine despite it.
I wouldn't, that's the thing. I was amazed that we managed to, particularly when things really got backs to the wall on the weekend against Scotland. I was really excited. I thought this is where everything that's happened in the last fortnight is telling at last, because it just looked like we were a little bit rudderless. And, you look at what Gatland said about, players having to leave training to go to meetings with their regions, to go meet the WRU. They're constantly on their phones, like texting their agents or their wives because they're worried about how they're going to get the mortgage paid at the end. It's been a typically only happens in Wales level of stupid distractions over the last fortnight, but it's an absolute testament to Gatland and to Edwards that they managed to basically shut out the noise enough that they've managed to still pull together as a team, because that could, anything could have happened really with everything that's been going on. And I hope we have a quiet week this week, to be honest.
And they did have their backs against the wall at the end. Whatever about Scotland, it's still a home team coming at you in the last 20 minutes of a Six Nations game. It's never going to be easy. And they did stand up to it. And I think it showed a lot of character. And that's what I'm kind of saying about that win streak. It's no matter who you play, you're winning close games. But, I don't know if there's a siege mentality or something maybe kind of.
I think there definitely is, actually. Yeah, I think, in that sort of situation particularly when your own union and your own regions are potentially not on your side, that's pretty good fodder for any kind of siege. And Gatland loves to create a siege mentality, whether it's a Lions tour, whether it's Wales or whatever. That us and them thing is so important, and coaches in general, to be honest, but Gatland absolutely loves it. And you can see this week with the way that they've defended and the way that they defended on the weekend, that kind of who cares about anybody else outside of this room? It's just about the 30 odd people here thing. I think is probably a message that he's used a lot in the last fortnight.
Yeah, I'm sure, and I'm sure that Ireland will be well aware that they're going into a very together team who are winning a lot of games. But before we talk just specifically on the game, what's your own take on what's been going on in the last couple of weeks? We're kind of none the wiser than we were a week ago, really, as to what exactly is going to happen. But as of right now, everything's up in the air for the future. Scarlets and Ospreys.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an Ospreys fan. It's not been a very fun couple of weeks, to be honest. It's been pretty depressing, but it's the nature of the beast, really. Welsh rugby isn't, ever since basically the game went professional, Welsh rugby cannot afford itself in a club game. There's not enough money in the country to basically pay for it, and that's always been the case. Something's got to be done about it. I don't think the ideas that they came out with in the last couple of weeks are the ideas that are going to solve their problems. But I think there's got to be a sense of we've got to go back to the drawing board now, and it needs to be a clean slate, and they need to start thinking of some other ideas beyond the ideas that they've had, because they're so unpopular with everyone.
Josh, I couldn't help but notice after Ospreys lost to Ulster and Scarlets were beaten by Treviso, you kind of took exception to some Irish fans, I suppose, what would you call it, criticism of the Welsh disdain for, perceivable disdain for the Pro 14. And I'm wondering, like, from your own perspective, from an Irish perspective particularly, what would you like to see? Like, is this, I think you might have said it was kind of a let them eat cake mentality. Like,
yeah. It was like a sort of, I took exception to some sort of people saying like, oh, if you get your game sorted out, it will all be fine, sort of thing. And yeah, the money, there are structural reasons within Welsh culture, not just Welsh rugby, as to why Welsh rugby has never been able to. There are myriad other reasons as well, not least the fact that governance in Welsh rugby is not good enough. But I think from a Pro 14 point of view, obviously we need to get more capital into the game somehow, because we live in a post CBC era now, and it's not just us that's going to be feeling the pinch before long if venture capital is flowing into the Prem and into the top 14 at the level that it is at the moment. But yeah, I think a transparency and even like, I get that we have a problem in the Pro 14 that it's being run, by 4 different or 5 different countries, unions now with 5 different agendas and 5 different objectives. And, for there to be some sort of coherency of purpose for what we actually want the Pro 14 to be, whether it is a place where, Irish provinces can use it as a really flipping good proving ground for their younger players to get some game time and learn on the job, so that when it comes to the important stuff of Europe, they've got really deep squads, or whether it is, somewhere that, South African teams can put their places they don't know where to put in Super Rugby and all this sort of thing, some sort of joined up thinking where it's not just 5 unions with 5 different agendas having, because that's the difference between us and the Premiership really. And I don't rate people who say that the Premiership is better than the Pro 14. The standard of rugby is not any better at all, I don't think. But I just think they're all on the same, the Premiership are all singing from the same hymn sheets. Premier Rugby, they negotiate as one, they communicate as one, and it shows in the results that they get in terms of the money that they're able to extract. And I think if we could be a bit more united, then there's a hope for the league that I'm not sure is there at the moment.
But just on that, Josh, just from an Irish perspective, like the Pro 14 seems to have really registered in Ireland. Like there's a kind of a buzz of excitement, particularly, for example, in a place like Leinster, at the prospect of young players coming through. And that, for whatever reason, you might know why, does not seem to exist in Wales. Like there seems to be kind of a ambiguity, or maybe it's just like at times it feels like a disdain towards the tournament from Welsh fans and things like. And I'm wondering, like, what do you put that down to? Like, what is from a Welsh perspective, what is the tournament lacking that Ireland seems to be able to capitalise on so well?
I think there's a problem with the season structure. Part of the problems is straight up jealousy.
Okay.
We do not have the resources or the development pathways that the Irish provinces do. And so when it comes to this time of year, for example, and we've got, still got Pro 14 games going on, it feels like, particularly because Welsh regions are actively compelled to spend a lot of their money on Welsh internationals that then disappear for all the international periods. There's a definite sort of playing with one arm tied behind your back vibe that has really soured the Pro 14 in a lot of eyes of like regional fans. And then when you get outside the regional fans, that's a whole other thing. To be honest, like the people who don't like the Pro 14 just don't like it because it exists, because they wish that the Welsh Premiership was still the top flight of Welsh rugby, and that all the 20 Premiership teams that existed in 1997 still were duking it out every week, which is absolute fantasy and would never work. But that's those people are there's no reaching those kind of people. But from a actual regional fan perspective, I think it's the sense that very rarely that we get. I think it's the timing thing as well, because of the way that the season goes. Like quite often, Welsh teams are playing other Welsh teams, and we've got all our internationals because of the way the season's structured. But then quite often, when we come around to playing the Irish teams, it's during the Six Nations because of the nature of the scheduling thing.
Yeah.
When you've still got capped All Blacks or capped Australian internationals or whatever turning out for you guys, and we've got a couple of lads who probably wouldn't even make a English Championship level club having to turn out for us because of how little cash there is to throw around. And there's it's not all about that, but I think that's the prevailing sense amongst a lot of fans, that we rarely, outside of like the occasional matchup in Europe, get to see a full strength Wales team, Welsh side go full strength against an Irish side to sort of see who's best. Again, and Warren Gatland alluded it today that most of the Welsh players have a bit of a chip on their shoulder about the Irish players, not because of anything that's happened at international level, but because they're quite used to getting battered by them in the Pro 14 on a regular basis, and so that kind of feeds that, I think.
Warren stirring it before a game against Ireland. I can't believe it. Shocked, I say.
Surely not. Never.
I'll very briefly talk about the game at the weekend, but just before you do, your sense on what is going to happen then, because outside, like, it looks like it is back to the drawing board, but like was there enough outrage to say there that they're going to that there will be an Ospreys and a Scarlets next year?
I think it's not so much the outrage; it's the fact that the Ospreys have basically put their flag in the ground and said we're not going anywhere and are threatening to get lawyers involved. That's usually enough to, put most people who are trying to try strange and not entirely sensible things to go, yeah, that's maybe not a brilliant idea. So, yeah, I think it is going to be back to the drawing board and we'll try something else.
All right, so we'll see what happens, and we'll definitely be following that over the coming weeks because, God, it's an amazing thing to just think that a team will just disappear. I know it's all happened before, but every time you go through it, it's just a remarkable thought.
And with the Ospreys, it's even more bizarre because they're Wales' most successful team by some distance, and it's very odd.
Okay, well, look, a happier note, because Wales do. It's something that occurred to me during that whole conversation is that Wales, I don't think that Ireland could, without the provincial structure, if so many players were playing abroad, and it's one of the things they're so protective of, if they could continue to produce at international level and continue to do it. But Wales just seem to, time and time again, and have all the players there. This is a huge rivalry over the last 10, 15 years. It's developed into, I remember hearing Shane Horgan talking about how for players this is now bigger than England. We talked earlier in the season about for Wales that the Ireland game is nearly bigger than England in some ways, especially for the players, if not for the fans. And for it to come down to this, Ireland getting back into some kind of form. I know it's probably not their 2018 form yet, but they have won 3 games in a row now. They played well, at least for 60 minutes on Sunday. How's your sense of how the game is going to go?
I mean, it's going to be business as usual, isn't it? In terms of these games are attritional and they are tight, and there's particularly in Cardiff, and the game is usually decided on some sort of incredibly controversial moment. So, I mean, I don't
Mike
see
Phillips around anymore. Anyway, thankfully.
I mean, it's like you say. I feel like Ireland have played themselves into a fair bit of form. They look a lot more like their old selves on the weekend. And typically, as far as we're concerned, it's like, of course, they look decent in the game now. They're coming to rob us of a Grand Slam, But I think it's going to be a very tight game. It's going to be a very attritional game. It's going to be very, the physicality is going to be off the charts. There's going to be a lot. I'm not going to say anything about the bloody Lions, but it has that sort of big brother, little brother vibe thing. It almost, it's slightly patronisingly, England's players have said that it has that vibe about it to Wales and England, but because of the Pro 14, it's almost become a little bit like that with Ireland as well. It's like Ireland are domestically a much better, much more sane and sensible country, as far as your success goes, with the provinces, and we've been watching that, enviously and playing catch up for a very long time, and so it adds that edge and it adds that niggle. But Wales are a very different animal, like you say. You take our players out of their regions, and something changes when they put that red shirt on. So, I don't like to call it because I just think it's possibly too close to call, because I think the Cardiff crowd will always be a factor when Wales are involved. It's ridiculous in professional sport in 2019 that something as, old-fashioned as cheering and having your home fans in front of you can have that much impact on an athlete's performance. But you've only got to look at the way that Wales have played when the Millennium Stadium, Municipality Stadium crowd has really got behind them in the last sort of 4 or 5 years. It changes something, and I think that will play a big part in it as well. And sadly, the ref is always going to be a factor as well, in terms of both sides have gotten sort of criticism for things that they're getting away with at the ruck and at the breakdown so far, and kind of what way the man in the middle decides to police that area of the game on the weekend, I think will be probably massive as well.
Well, we can't wait for it. It's going to be a brilliant occasion anyway, and I suppose if Ireland can deny Wales the Grand Slam, I think it probably gives England the championship, which isn't ideal, but it does
it just for that.
It does send, I think, 3 teams into the World Cup then from the Six Nations in really good form. So there's a lot kind of to play for and a lot kind of at stake. And I think that the atmosphere is going to be unbelievable. And
it's going to be off the
occasion.
charts.
So, Josh, listen, thanks so much for joining us. The Blood and Mud podcast, I think, where can we, or when can we listen to that this week?
It's usually out Tuesday morning, same as you guys. So wherever good podcasts are sold, Apple Podcasts, Acast, all that good stuff. So
Well, I hope everybody checks it out, and we'll talk to you again soon, Josh. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, fellas.
Brilliant stuff from Josh there. Really, really good guest. Someone that I'll definitely be checking out, the Mud and Blood podcast. Something very interesting that he talked about there was the influence of a crowd, right? And it's actually a very Six Nations thing as well. Like, think about John Hayes crying in the national anthems and how pumped up these guys get for things. And I do think a home crowd actually does matter. But then I'm listening to you with your line out mumbo jumbo and your smart rugby players and them knowing more than any of us could ever possibly know about the game, and you're like, how do those things coexist? But they actually do, though. Like, you know, if you see, like, there is definitely a, like, home advantage. It, like, sport is still comes ultimately down to having been G'd up by your fans.
And like, it's, you know, everybody needs a vibes man. Like, you always need that kind of thing to rub off, and if that can be your crowd, or if it's a player who's particularly vocal or whatever, it's bound to have an impact. I mean, it's like, you think about the most crucial periods in games when the home crowd kind of gets vocalized, it can't help but help. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, and it's interesting, and actually I do kind of, like, it is one of the reasons that I think sometimes we're looking at this game going, like, you know, are Ireland as good as Wales? Can we beat them? And it's like, yes, we can beat them. It's like, will we though? It's like, being in Cardiff is a massive thing, and I think that's what, if you look at how worn down England were by the end of that game, yes, a lot of it was because Wales played really well and tackled them into the ground, and, you know, caused them to tackle a lot, I suppose, is even more tiring. But I think the atmosphere in Cardiff for a whole night just kind of like wore them down in the end, you know. Anyway, look, we'll see what happens, and we'll talk. I want to get your Ireland team to start against Wales before we find it out on Thursday. But one other thing I just wanted to mention on the show, we always talk about the Irish players playing around the world at this stage, I suppose, and definitely a really interesting one from an almost forgotten son of Irish rugby is Ian Madigan nailing a conversion from the sideline to win for Bristol at the weekend in the 88th minute.
Yeah, some bottle. It's unbelievable. Yeah. It's a, like, speaking of Irish, like, you got Jake Heenan playing at 7 in the same game. John Muldoon is obviously coaching there with Pat Lam.
Yeah,
a guy like Madigan, like, there's kind of like a nice success story in the idea that he can still do that. But like, even if it's outside the sphere of Irish rugby, like, we keep going back to that idea. But it's like the bottle and the nerve to kind of stand up and do something like that, and on his right foot, singing it straight across. Unbelievable result for Bristol, who
he absolutely nailed it. Sorry,
yeah. I mean, it was like a peach, but a team who at one stage looked like they were in a relegation dogfight and now have their eyes on Europe. Probably legitimately a bad result for Northampton, who are now down in 7th. Also really bad week for Wasps. We spoke to Ian Coster about this idea that they were going to kick on in the Six Nations period.
And that was a 74th minute penalty that cost them that game. 84th minute. Sorry,
that must be the biggest sickener for Wasps at the minute, is the fact that they keep losing games in the last minute. Like, they lost to Leicester by 4 points, lost this game by a point. They're now, I think they're 8th. Like, the idea of missing out in Europe is now a distinct possibility for a team who had legitimate top 4 aspirations at the start of the year. We just spoke to Josh about the idea that Sean Edwards might. So there's been a lot of rumours that Sean Edwards is going to come down there, and Di Youngs is going to remain as director of rugby, but he could come in as head coach. From somebody like Ian Costa's perspective, they've already had a really small coaching team, so I think that could be a beneficial thing to have a guy like him come in. They have Andy Titterell, who's the old Sale Sharks hooker, the English. He played a couple games for England as well. He's their attacks coach, but other than that, they don't have a huge coaching setup, so that might be to their benefit. There's a couple of really interesting things happening in the Premiership right now that maybe we could delve into further down the line. Like, sure, this Saracen scandal, potential scandal, when it comes to, are they breaking the salary cap or not, or an owner who owns a lot of property which seems to be rented out to a lot of his players and things like this. There's a whole kind of host of narratives there that we would certainly be.
Are any English club truly within the salary cap? Though I think is a legitimate question, actually. You know, and I know like there is gifts and different things going on, and it'll be interesting to see what comes out of the Saracens things, and lots going on in the Premiership. Just briefly back to the Bristol thing though. 8 minutes overtime is a hell of a drive. Like, that's Munster Northampton stuff, like, you know. And it's funny because we're always talking about Madigan. I didn't actually see the try that they got to lead to that conversion, but right out in the sideline, I'd say that was one hell of a drive. Like, and I definitely am not one for comparing sports, and I think that every sport has its own, but there's something about that sort of, there's one play left. If there's a knock on or the ball goes out of play, the game is over. Yeah. You know, there's something, it's Ireland and France last year in Paris. I don't know if there's much as exciting as that drive to win a game when you only have one chance, and if you don't get it, it's over. And it happens once every 20 times.
I think it says a lot about a team's mentality as well. It's like a tangible evidence of a team actually kind of having that belief to stick with it. And like, it takes ridiculous accuracy to maintain that, in that
so
level
much
of the game.
Confidence, because you don't always go for the magic shot. You know that you can recycle and you can go for it. It's such belief.
And Madigan actually floated the pass for that try. He gave that as well. He did would you call it an assist? I mean, he floated that as well. Like, so he was kind of pivotal to all elements of that late comeback.
Right, we'll keep an eye on Bristol and the Premiership in general, but we've one more week of the Six Nations, and you know it does trump it all. We'll God, in a couple of weeks we'll be relaxed, sitting back talking about Super Rugby and everything. We won't know ourselves, but right now we're very nervous because Ireland are going to Cardiff at the weekend, and you know ultimately if Ireland win this game, suddenly there's a very different conversation. You're going in having won in Cardiff, you're going in having won 4 out of 5 games. And things aren't looking so bad as we head to the World Cup. It's a massive, massive game. What's going to be the team? What do you think the team should be?
It is a massive game in terms of context of the Six Nations, but the one overriding team should be the World Cup. I keep going back to this idea, and I think right now.
But if we win this game, doesn't that make our chances in the World Cup all the better?
It does. Absolutely, it does in terms of what it does for confidence and things like that. But from my perspective, Ireland have 3 positions where their number 2 is either undercooked or is not clear.
Okay.
So those 3 positions, I think, right now is fullback, absolutely, the 100% fullback. Your scrum half, I think that's still very unclear, and your hooker is still very unclear. That's 3 kind of problematic positions, and you can't change all 3 because it's essentially throwing you a game. But if we were to fixate on one, the idea that I think fullback is going to be a really problematic situation for Ireland, because it is so clear that there is a massive gap between Rob Kearney and everybody else, that we don't know who is going to, and that is partly down to, as we've spoken about in the past, the defensive setup they're playing. That's partly down to the age profile or the careers of players who potential there. So Jordan Armour is very young. Somebody like Robbie Henshaw hasn't played there a lot. Will Addison is just right back in Ireland. All issues that means that thing. But if it is going to be Jordan Armour, I think Jordan Armour should start against Wales, because of what it would, in terms of what it could do for a player who would 100% be on the plane going to things. But the exposure at that level of rugby. So Rob Kearney pulled out of the game on Sunday because of a calf strain. We're still not sure. We're waiting an injury update on what exactly is the story there. But with that in mind, and even despite it, to be honest, I think it stands to reason that to give somebody like Jordan Armour that level of exposure, it could blow up in your face. Maybe they will certainly go after him. They're already a kicking team, but I think it's worth it, because right now Ireland don't know who their second choice is, and it's a situation with eerie kind of ramifications in terms of what happened in Argentina when we didn't know who our second choice players were, particularly at 10, and in
France for Argentina in 2007. Who do you think? Well, we had no second number 10. I think is kind of how that panned out. We had a 12 in Paddy Wallace that was forced to play there. How do you think Larmour did on Saturday?
I thought
he wasn't really tested too much. There was one high ball that he missed, but turned out was a knock on.
I thought he was great going forward. He wasn't tested defensively, bar the knock on, which it didn't really matter in the end. But he wasn't tested defensively. He will be if he was to start. To be honest, I'd be surprised if he starts. But I just think in terms of what it means, in the grand scheme of things, Ireland aren't going to win this Nations, because I think England are going to win this weekend anyway. So in that scenario, I think it stands to reason that you try and develop. It could be a huge missing block in terms of building towards a World Cup. I thought Larmour did really well going forward. He was lively with the ball in hand.
Yeah,
I think if he is
that
going
first
to
kick he had just kind of,
was
I
brilliant.
thought that it might actually launch it, but like he had that one brilliant break, and you know, whatever about defensively, what we know Larmour can do is something that we have to see for Ireland if he's going to justify, because he is this incredible attacking force. But he probably should have scored in that. Like, I mean, I was looking at the replay, and it was like he had the angle that he could have made it, and he kind of didn't back himself, and it was just a split second that he hesitated, and he half turned, and then he was never going to make it after that.
And I actually think after Gary Ringrose, Jordan Larmour is the best player in Irish rugby in terms of when it doesn't go to plan, like if a strike play doesn't land or if a pass goes to ground, in terms of relying on his own innovation to manifest something. And that's something that you could be really, really beneficial for Ireland. The fact that you would bring someone like as versatile as he could be in terms of covering the back three to a World Cup is also paramount. I just think in the grand scheme of things he should play. Okay. I mean, to move on from that, I think you leave Stockdale, Gary Ringrose, Bundy Aki and Keith Ayres as they are. Your halfback partnership, they finally have shown inklings of a return to form, so I don't think you change Sexton or Murray either.
No, neither do I.
The only other kind of change area I think is in the back row. That'll probably be forced because of Dan Leavy. We also don't know if Dan Levy's going to be back. I think Ireland stumbled across a back row partnership last weekend that could prove really, really beneficial. There was, when CJ Stander first burst onto the scene, there was talk that he could play at 7 with Jamie Heaslip at the time. Now, we never actually got to see it in action.
Yeah, ultimately they were keeping O'Mahony out because it was Sean O'Brien at 7 and Stander at 6.
But if we were really going to go back to picking on form, so what you have to bear in mind is that coming down the tracks here is Tipuric, Navidi and Ross Moriarty, which is an incredible back row combination, not only in terms of their balance but in terms of their ball carrying ability. And in terms of countering that, if you had somebody like Jack Conan and CJ Stander in your back row, like Peter O'Mahony isn't a huge ball carrier, but it's not his wheelhouse. It's not what he does. But in terms of the other two, in terms of what they could offer, in terms of matching it blow for blow, I think that could be a really potent partnership. And I actually think it's an area we're persevering with now. I think Jack Conan has done so little wrong. The only mitigating factor is if somebody like Dan Leavy is back, because we've spoken in the past about what he does at the breakdown, which is huge. Yeah. So if he's back, I would totally understand why Schmidt would persevere him. But in lieu of that, I think you persevere with Jack Conan. I think it's only fair to continue with form.
One. I wouldn't have said you say that, but I can't really argue with you either. I want to say something very brief about Dan Leavy actually. Now, like, Dan Leavy had a very good Six Nations last year. I think he's even had a better one this year, because the longer he's gone, the more I think people are like, me personally anyway, and I'm always very impressed with him whenever he plays. And I got to the stage, like, after last year's Six Nations, where I'm like, this guy has to play, and I'm sorry, I love Sean O'Brien, but this guy needs to be at 7. And I don't know if Schmidt has ever been in that category. It seems to be one of 3 at 7 on any given day. But I think the longer this year has gone, and it's like Van der Fleer's done well in his way, but and Sean hasn't been in bad form or anything like that. But I think you're kind of going, we're missing our first choice number 7 at this stage, you know. Yeah. And I think it's more clear now that he's been out of the team.
Yeah, especially in terms of, as we spoke about earlier, like the balance that he brings. Also, it's worth bearing in mind that in the past, Dan Levy's returned from injury instantly. Like, he didn't need a warm-up game and was immense when he's done that previously. Now, you could say the same thing about... I just wonder
about the last game of a tournament. I think Henshaw and Leavy, I think at this stage, are probably just going to be left, you know?
Oh, I mean, if it's the predicted team, I would be very surprised if he's in it. To be honest, I also would be surprised if Jack Owen is there either. Yeah. I think the fact that Schmidt referenced Sean O'Brien and Sean Cronin after the game would lead me to believe that 2 of them will come back into the squad, I think. But in my own opinion, you should kind of pursue with that.
Reece Ruddock is knocking around as well.
Yeah, he is, and he's a really dynamic presence, a guy who Schmidt really, really likes. Yeah. But the second row, I think, Iain Henderson and James Ryan, that's a great partnership. Based off what they did last week, I think you should continue with that.
That's the best Henderson's played for Ireland in 2 years or so, I think. Like, you know, and it's really good to see that, you know, this guy that I kept saying is almost unlucky because he's waiting for his chance, and then James Ryan comes out of nowhere and he's a superstar, and then he's still there, he's waiting for his chance, him versus Toner, and then, you know, like, as that's coming and Toner's getting injured, it's like Tyke Burns suddenly becomes this player who's like man of the match in every game for his club, and it's like as if, am I going to get passed over again here? But he's got his chance, and he's playing really well whenever he's been fit this season for Ulster, and now he's in and he did it for Ireland, and I was actually happy for him. I think that he deserved to have that kind of day where he wasn't like James Ryan got man of the match. There was about 4 choices. I would have had Henderson as one of them.
Yeah. I absolutely would have as well. Another one who would have been in the record for that, I think, is Cian Healy. I think when we come to eventually we're going to pick a team in this tournament, I think right now he looks nailed on for it. He's been incredible. Like the resurgence in his career is one of the most remarkable things that's happened in Irish rugby recently, and he's just going from strength to strength to the extent where Jack McGrath is now looking at moving to Ulster. Which I mean, quite rightly, if he's in search of game time, it might kind of make sense.
Yeah. Am I right in saying that Best and Furlong are your next two?
Yeah.
You're not going to drop Rory?
No, I wouldn't go to drop Rory because of what it loses. In fact, I think in terms of correcting certain areas, like if a lot of people have clamoured to see Sean Cronin come back, and I can totally understand that because of the form he's in. But I do think that there needs to be a very clear second choice starting hooker, and that's something that we still don't have right now, which is a slight concern. So based off that, I think Niall Scannell could probably consider himself unlucky if he isn't on the bench. I mean, people are gonna. Sean Cronin is a fan favourite, and I love Sean Cronin as well in terms of what as an impact sub. But thinking long term, I think there's an argument to be made that somebody like Niall Scannell should be on the bench. For the grand things. I also think that Porter will probably come back in as well, which is probably fair enough in terms of what you're looking for these kind of players. So you're looking for about 25 caps for these kind of mid-20 tier players who will play every game, whether it be off the bench or starting a game against Samoa or whatever when it comes to a World Cup. And the guys like Porter, who are in single-digit caps right now, they will need kind of the exposure to this level of game plan and stuff like that. So with that in mind, I think he should come back in as well. That's what you're trying to look. You're trying to build that mid-tier depth that will hopefully sustain, because Ireland are I think Ireland in terms of their actual ruck percentages or their amount of rucks they're hitting, they're a lot higher than a lot of other teams. I think they were over 140 for a couple of games, which is a huge amount of rucks. Yeah. And based off that idea, that's an attritional game plan. Phases. What my point is, that's attritional, and because it's attritional, you inevitably suffer injuries, and you want to be in a situation where you can account for those injuries. And because of that, I think players like Jordan Larmour should start in Wales. I don't think it'll happen.
No, I just want to point out that you've gone with that front row, which is an unchanged front row, and you've somehow really kind of gone through that team with a lot of kind of, made it like smoke and daggers, I would say, to ultimately pick the team that, other than the injured Josh van der Fleer would have come on for, you picked the same team.
I think there's Joe Schmidt, actually, I think this is something that is burn his mind. He keeps referencing the fact that he's given certain players game time, like he got Jack Owen in his start. He's talked about the fact that he's had 4 different hookers involved in the squads and things like this, but you can't beat exposure at elite elite level.
Top teams, the biggest games.
Those kind of game time is what will really matter. And it's just why it's a shame that Joey Carberry got injured and maybe hasn't got the same level of exposure, but he did play a game against Scotland. And
it's why success can work against you sometimes if it happens too far out from, and I think it happened to us in 2007, is that it's very hard not to have faith in those players, but form doesn't stay the same, people come through, and it is hard to kind of make that decision. But if you look at what did the Italy game give us, well, it probably put Jack Conan on the bench for this week, where he came on and got his chance and played very well in a much bigger game, and will probably stay at least involved in the squad. And what we don't often talk about when we're talking about these 15s, and you did it very well there, is that the bench is just as important. And it is rugby more than any other sports, a 23 team person game. So although Andrew Conway was sitting on the bench a long time on Saturday,
I thought that was a shame. He only got 5 minutes exposure. Maybe it's slightly mystery, although at the same time France were starting to fight back, and maybe you don't want to rock the boat too much at the same time. I think he got a lot of game time in November. Certainly, I know maybe the designations mightn't have gone exactly as the way he goes. I think he should still be the number 23 this weekend. All things considered, I still think that John Cooney should still be the backup scrum half, all things considered, even though Kieran Marion was immense for Connacht and hasn't done a whole lot wrong either. But again, you're talking about building a tier of competition, that kind of level of performance. A guy like Jack Carty, who now looks really, really comfortable at this level based off 2 kind of what would you call them, cameo performances.
Yeah.
Like all that does is kind of spur on those around him. Jack Conan forces somebody like Ross Byrne to respond to his level of performance, and that kind of a rising tide brings up all boats. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and look, normally we would we'd get you to bring us through your rolling team of the Six Nations. I think we've gone on long enough now. We're obviously getting excited. Ireland got into back of form, but you'll do that on Balls.ie during the week instead, and people can read it there. And then we'll talk next Tuesday about the we'll do our final team of the Six Nations, working off Maurice's week by week work there. But yeah, look, I mean, you can obviously tell we're excited. We're back into it. There's nothing like the back-to-back weeks though, because we're straight back in this week. Next Saturday, Super Saturday, 3 games. There's a lot of sport on this weekend in general, actually. But in terms of rugby, Ireland-France, or Wales-Ireland is the middle game there. So nice time. You know, we can go beat Wales, put our feet up, assume that England are going to beat Scotland, but then be absolutely delighted when Scotland come out and get 5 tries and Ireland are sitting around in an empty Millennium Stadium getting the getting the Six Nations trophy yet again. That's what's going to happen, isn't it?
Spot on, yeah.
Do you know what would be the worst thing, actually? If Wales and Ireland draw, then... No, Wales would just lose the Six Nations then in general, wouldn't they? Sorry, I was thinking that they could have to hang around and get the trophy in their empty stadium, which would be shit. Anyway, none of this is going to happen. England are probably either Wales are going to win the Grand Slam or England are going to win the championship in Twickenham. But Ireland could go out on a high and actually go into the World Cup with some momentum. Either way, we can't wait, and we'll talk to you about how it all went down next Tuesday. Take it easy.